For this moment of learning, I'm going to do something, well, every time it's different, so I was going to say I was doing something a little different, but I'm going to take something that's not so much of a theological sort of conversation and not talking as much about what's going on in this room, but it's talking about something that we are all familiar with, but I know that I've had some people ask me, what exactly does that mean and what is that from? So I'm going to talk a little bit about language. What do words such as thy, thine, thou mean, and why do they show up occasionally, such as in thou shalt not and other things like that? We see them in hymns, we see these things, and people are like, I think I know what they mean. I've heard them in context a lot, but why in the world do we have those things, and what exactly, where did they come from, and why don't we say them anymore, or whatever? I've had people ask me, so I thought it would be worth going through, and it'd be kind of interesting to take a look at that. So I'm going to just kind of hit on a few things. Every language kind of evolves over time. It changes over time. As you speak in language now is going to be very different than what people speak 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and so forth. Things change. We see that even as we read through the Bible. For us, it's translated into one contemporary sort of language, but if you're a Greek or a Hebrew scholar, especially with the Hebrew, it's written over hundreds and thousands of years that it's such a long time that even that language changes. Well, the English language is no exception. It has changed over time, and to put it quite simply, these words are kind of remnants of the English language as it was commonly used a few hundred years ago. And we also think back then, the education system was different, everything was very different, and not as many people read, that sort of thing. So as the printing press came up, I thought it was interesting that group, the TNT group is going to go visit the printing press. As that came in, that affected a lot of things, affected a lot of standardization of language and so forth. But I'm just going to pick on a few words here. Thou, thy, thine. Oop, I put thou twice, look at that. I really like thou, evidently. I had thou, I have another one in there. Ye, shalt, hast, all those sorts of things, and there's doest, and there's lots of different things. But some of these words are remnants, and actually, if you've learned other languages, some of this actually starts to make sense because you understand in other languages they have some things that we don't have in modern English. So just to kind of say, typically we don't use these words in modern English, but they occasionally show up for a variety of reasons. A few of them that I was just thinking about is that many have memorized certain Bible verses from the King James Version, which would have been written in the contemporary language of a couple hundred years ago. And so that's something that they're used to, O ye of little faith and things like that. Many classic books and plays, such as Shakespeare and other ones, are still read and quoted. A few religious groups, such as Quakers, Amish, and others, still use some of these words. And they also appear in many of our classic hymns, which if we updated them, they would kind of modify the meter or the rhyme of the song so much that it would be unwieldy. And so we don't tend to pull them out of those because it tends to make it a little bit hard to deal with or hard to understand, or sometimes it doesn't rhyme the same way and it kind of loses its allure. So I'm just going to tell you real quickly what some of these mean. So we use the word, if you've ever had a situation where you are walking into a crowded room and say, oh, you need to do this. How do they know if you're talking to them personally or them as a group? In modern English, we don't know. You have to know on context. So as a foreign language speaker learns English, they have to learn this weird quirk about English is that we use the same word for a singular and a plural. It gets kind of tricky. But that wasn't always the case. Thou meant you, singular. If you said thou, everybody would know you didn't mean us. So if I said, thou art whatever, or thou whatever I would put on there, then you would know I'm talking about a singular. Thee would also be a you singular, used in a different context. Unto thee, it would be a recipient of something. And then thy or thine are something, a possessive of singular. It is of thine. Know thine self, to thine own self be true, that sort of thing. And thy and thine are basically like the words a and an. We put an N on the end of before the next word, which begins with a consonant or a vowel. Thy and thine are the same way. If you ever look up those, that's the difference. It's the same word, it's just that one is used depending on what the word after it is. So ye is the plural of thou. O ye of little faith. And when you read that, you're like, he's talking to a lot of people, not one person. ye. It's the plural of thou. It's also confusing because ye is, just as a bonus content thing, ye was also a word that was used for the word thee, because the word thee, before they had th in the English language, they had another character which we don't have in modern English. And so when the printing press came around, they put, instead of thee, somebody decided to put a y. So you still see that as in like ye old tavern, or ye, whatever it means, thee, that sort of thing. So it's confusing because you use things. Shalt is shall, and hast and is have. And we understand most of these from context, but I thought it would be good to kind of go through there. And it's kind of interesting to know that these words are a remnants of that, because we've dropped that second person singular variance. But if you study other languages, whether it be Spanish or French or other things like that, you will have those sorts of variants in those languages that we don't have in English. And actually, if you take the Old English, it's actually more precise than our modern. We have to understand it tends to be more confusing when we're talking about it in modern English. So there's a little English lesson for today. I just wanted to kind of reduce the confusion. I'm not sure I actually did, or I may have confused things more, but there you have it for our moment of learning.